My beloved child, I see the way you name something when it enters your life. You do not name it because you have weighed it carefully enough. You name it because it arrives at the exact moment you are weary. You name it because you have just released a long breath after many days of holding yourself together. You name it because, in that moment, you no longer have the strength to ask more questions. I do not fault you for this. I know how far you have walked before becoming tired. I know the stretches where you tried to stand a little longer even as your knees trembled. But I want you to look more deeply, not to take back what you are holding, but to understand what it is that you are holding. There are times when you do not call something a blessing because you are certain it comes from me. You call it a blessing because it finally makes you feel lighter. When pressure withdraws for a moment, you exhale and assume that heaven has answered. When a door opens just as you are about to give up, you believe that I have intervened. But right timing is not always right source. Some things arrive quickly because they do not need to pass through me. Some things appear when you are at your weakest, not to lift you up, but to test what you will lean on when you no longer have the strength to stand upright. I do not reveal this to make you suspicious of everything good. I speak so that you will stop equating relief with guidance. My guidance does not only make you feel lighter, it places you correctly. It does not merely ease pressure, it restores order. If something reduces your pain but does not return you to alignment, you need to slow down, not to refuse it, but to ask. I am not in a hurry to remove anything from your hands. I only want you to see whose hand is placing it there. Beauty is not a guarantee of life. Some things carry no scent of darkness, no sign of threat, nothing that alerts your caution. They carry a familiar fragrance, pleasant, comforting. The scent of the hope you once prayed for. They resemble the answer you have waited for so long. So you do not question them. But reflected light is not the source of light. A polished surface says nothing about what lies at the core. Some things are beautiful because they have been polished by your deepest desires. And because they fit so well, you assume they are right. I do not oppose beauty. I oppose beauty that does not carry life. My life is not found merely in appearance. It is found in what something produces within you. Something can excite you without causing you to grow. Something can give you hope without setting you free. Something can look gentle without having the power to heal. If you only look at the surface, you will call anything that sparkles light. But my light does not need polishing to be recognized. It shines directly and exposes what has always been there. I say this not so that you will close your heart, but so that you will open your eyes. For it is precisely when you are weary that your eyes are most likely to close. It is when you need comfort most that you confuse comfort with guidance. It is when you are thirsty that you stop asking where the water comes from. I know you are there, and I do not come to snatch the cup from your hand. I come to ask whether you want to know where this stream is leading. Do not think that I am trying to frighten you. I do not sow panic. Panic causes the soul to contract, and I build nothing upon contraction. I speak to keep you. I do not cut off your blessing. I protect you from what bears the name of blessing but does not carry me. I do not close doors out of jealousy. I stand at the threshold so that you do not step into something that will cause you to lose yourself. When I warn you, it is not because I doubt you, but because I trust you enough to stop and listen. Let me be clear if I remain silent. You may move very quickly, but speed is not always safety. I choose to speak so that you will slow down by a single beat. That beat does not restrain you, it holds you. When you are held, you do not need to defend yourself. When you are not defending yourself, you hear more clearly. I do not speak to make you suspicious of what you have. I speak so that you will stop handing over guidance to momentary feelings. True blessing does not require you to trade away your peace. What comes from me does not need you to hide. It does not require you to shrink back. It does not demand self-justification. My blessing may challenge you, but it does not hollow you out. It may call you to maturity, but it does not distort you. My blessing comes with peace, light, and freedom. These three are inseparable. If you must sacrifice one of them to keep the others, you are entering into an exchange I did not sign. Look again at how you respond when something enters your life. Do you begin explaining more than usual? Do you start keeping a corner hidden from the light? Do you draw inward to protect what you are holding? These signs do not appear to condemn you. They appear to lead you away from what will make you smaller. I do not call you to live in a safely contained darkness. I call you to live in the light, where you do not need to protect yourself with silence or arguments. And then there is a sign that is very familiar, very small, yet very true. One, I want you to recognize early. You find yourself rushing to decide, rushing to secure, rushing to respond, rushing to grasp before it disappears. You fear being late. You fear missing out. You fear that if you do not seize it now, it will be gone. And you call that urgency, faith. But I do not lead you by fear. Faith does not urge you to betray my rhythm. Faith does not force you to run when I am standing still. I spoke this plainly long ago. Without ambiguity or metaphor, desire without knowledge is not good. How much more will hasty feet miss the way? Proverbs 1:9-2. Not may miss the way, not sometimes miss the way, but will miss the way. When you rush, you no longer hear. When you rush, you no longer discern. When you rush, you choose by reflex rather than by presence. I do not want you correcting a lifetime of mistakes simply because you refuse to slow down by one beat at the beginning. Here, I am not asking you to let go. I am not asking you to turn back. I am only placing light beneath your feet so that you can see how fast you are moving. And when you begin to realize that your heartbeat is leading you instead of me, you will understand that what I am doing is not taking away, but holding you before you take one more step without asking me. I want you to notice something very subtle taking place within you. Even when you believe you are fine, when you rush, you do not merely move faster, you begin to change the way you listen. You listen selectively. You hear what reassures you and disregard what would require you to stop. You call this wisdom, but in truth it is avoidance wrapped in very reasonable logic. You do not say that you do not trust me. You simply say that you do not need to ask so carefully this time. And it is precisely in these this time moments that my rhythm is pushed aside. Do you realize that haste rarely comes alone? It is almost always accompanied by a quiet fear of being late, fear of losing, fear of being left behind. You fear that if you pause to ask, others will move ahead. You fear that if you wait, the door will close. You fear that if you do not seize the moment, you will be forced to return to the starting point empty-handed. But I do not lead you by that fear. I have never measured your life by speed. I do not require you to prove your faith by running faster than peace. There are moments when you say you are walking by faith, yet in truth you are trying to control the outcome. You call it being proactive, but beneath it lies an unnamed anxiety. You want to be sure you do not miss what is good. You want to secure what is open. You want to keep everything within reach. And little by little, you shift from trusting to managing. Trust allows me to hold things. Management allows you to feel at ease. But when you manage, you also carry the weight yourself, and I did not create you to carry it alone. Look more closely at what you are feeling right now. It is not exactly a clear fear. It feels more like a constant, low-grade tension, a quiet inner pressure that makes it hard for you to sit still. A sense that if you do not act immediately, you will fall behind. You begin to compare your pace with others. You see progress all around you and wonder why you must be slower. And while you tell yourself that you are being alert, you are, in fact, allowing an external rhythm to dictate your inner one. I do not fault you for this. I know the world has trained you this way. It has taught you that slow is losing. Stopping is missing out. Waiting is weakness. But my rhythm is not the rhythm of the world. I am not late. I am not early. I am right. And my rightness does not depend on your sense of urgency. When you let haste lead you, you do not merely move faster, you move out of alignment. And misalignment does not always cause immediate failure, but it will exhaust you over time without your knowing why. I want you to notice another change that takes place when you rush. Peace no longer holds the central position. It does not disappear entirely, but it retreats. It is no longer the foundation, it becomes the reward. You tell yourself that once things settle, once you secure this, once you achieve that, peace will return. But I did not place peace at the end of the road. I placed it at the beginning. My peace is not a reward for success, it is the sign of right guidance. When peace no longer governs, you begin to grow accustomed to a different kind of energy. It makes you more alert, faster, more reactive. You call it excitement. You think you are coming alive again, but that energy does not allow you to rest. It does not allow you to be still. It pulls you forward, and you must keep running so as not to fall behind. I do not lead you by chaos. I do not need you to live in tension to prove that you are on the right path. I have spoken. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts. Colossians 3:1-5. To rule means to decide, not merely to visit. To rule means that when peace withdraws, you stop to inquire, rather than accelerate to fill the void. But when you label anxiety as excitement, you hand authority over to emotion. You no longer ask whether something is right, you only ask whether it makes you feel strong. Here, I'm not asking you, what are you gaining? I am asking a different question, slower, deeper. Who are you becoming? What you are pursuing, does it make you softer or harder? Humbler or more defensive? More truthful or merely more polished? This question does not surface in dramatic moments, but in ordinary life, in how you speak to those close to you when you are tired, in how you respond to correction, in whether you listen or interrupt when someone touches a place you would rather avoid. You begin to notice that you are protecting more, not truth, but image. You choose your words more carefully, not out of wisdom, but out of fear of being touched. You allow yourself to be less vulnerable with those who were once very close. And when someone offers feedback, instead of listening, you explain politely, reasonably, convincingly, yet your heart closes faster than it used to. These changes do not happen suddenly. They accumulate, small enough not to trigger alarm, long enough to become a way of life. I remind you of Solomon not because he began wrongly, he began very well. He asked for wisdom, and I gave it. But toward the end of his life, his heart was divided, not because he hated me, but because he did not keep his heart whole. He allowed many voices at once to shape him. He did not lose everything in one great decision. He lost it through small, prolonged compromises. I remind you of this not to frighten you, but to illuminate this truth. A right beginning is not enough if you do not guard the direction of who you are becoming. When light shines long enough, you begin to see a clear difference. Blessing causes you to open, while a snare causes you to contract. Blessing opens your hands, a snare makes you clench. Blessing allows you to breathe deeply. A snare makes you hold your breath to keep what you have. Blessing teaches you trust. A snare drives you to control. And you begin to see where you are contracting, checking your phone more often, rehearsing scenarios in your mind, calculating more before speaking honestly. Not because you are evil, but because you are afraid of loss. This contraction is subtle. It is not loud. It feels like a very gentle but constant tightening. You begin to live in order to hold on, rather than to give. And when you live to hold on, you no longer expand. I am not opposed to prudence. I am opposed to contraction. Because contraction does not protect you, it diminishes you. It narrows your capacity to hear, to love, to trust. I do not forbid you from stepping into what is new. I do not close doors out of jealousy. I teach you how to step. There is a rhythm. I want you to learn the rhythm of pausing before deciding, of asking before grasping, of listening before speaking. When you move in this rhythm, you do not lose yourself. When you move in this rhythm, you do not need to hide. When you move in this rhythm, peace returns to its rightful place of rule, and what does not belong to me begins to reveal its true form. You sense that your pace of life is slowing not because you lack motivation, but because there is presence. You begin to ask before answering. You allow silence to return. And within that silence, a question is quietly growing, not loud, not forceful, but deeply true. You stand between what you want to hold and what I want to hold you. These two are no longer parallel. You have not decided yet, but your soul knows this is no longer a small matter. I do not rush you into choosing. I simply bring you to the place where you can no longer keep moving without being honest. The light has already shone enough for you to see the shape of the road ahead, and just when you think you can take one more step to delay facing it, that question remains there suspended, waiting for you to meet it. I know you are standing still here not because you have run out of paths, but because you have begun to hear yourself, not the noise of fear, but a very subtle recognition something is not aligned. You cannot yet name it, but you can feel it. When you think you are moving forward, your soul gently pulls at your hand, not to stop you, but to ask, and that question does not come from the outside. It needs no reminder. It rises from the deepest place you often overlook when you are in a hurry. You begin to recall very small moments, the times you decided more quickly than usual, the moments you answered before you asked, the times you nodded while inside there was a very soft weight. You did not call that rebellion. You called it flexibility. But flexibility is not the same as surrender. Flexibility allows you to evade. Surrender allows you to stand still long enough to listen, and I see that you have grown accustomed to calling avoidance wisdom. There is something I want you to look at directly, not to condemn you, but to free you. When you fear being late, you begin to believe that I am hurried as well. When you fear loss, you begin to think that I might arrive too late. When you fear being left behind, you begin to act as though I am no longer standing watch over you. I do not blame you for these thoughts, but I will not allow them to lead you further without being named. I have never led you by pressure. I have never required you to run in order to hold on to what I have ordained. If something comes from me, it does not need your haste to exist. It does not require you to trade your peace to keep it. It does not ask you to hide from me in order to protect it. Anything that demands those things simply to remain has already revealed its nature. I am keeping you here not because I want to slow you down, but because I want you whole. I do not take away what is good. I block what is counterfeit. I do not close the door to your future. I protect your identity. You have grown used to measuring blessing by what you receive, but I measure blessing by what you do not lose. And what I do not want you to lose is the ability to hear me simply without pressure, without being pulled by fear. At this point, I am not asking you to decide. I am not demanding that you let go. I am only allowing you to stand still long enough to realize that the rhythm you are walking in no longer comes entirely from me. And when you recognize that, you will understand why I said from the beginning what you call a blessing may only be something that arrives when you are tired, not necessarily something that comes from the right source. I do not reveal this to make you doubt everything you have. I reveal it so that you do not carry a beautifully wrapped trap into the next stretch of your journey. You are at a threshold, not yet a major crossroads, but a point where, if you step forward without awareness, you will travel very far before realizing you have drifted. I am here not pushing, not pulling, only standing close enough for you to know that if you stop and ask, I am still waiting to answer. What causes you to slip does not always appear in moments when you are on your knees or seeking me intensely. Most of the time, it comes when you are living an ordinary day, unguarded, undefended. When you reply to a message that seems harmless, when you accept a coffee invitation without a clear intention, when you sit down in a conversation you think is only to pass the time, I see those moments more clearly than you do, because that is where your guard is usually lowest. You once thought traps would come in major decisions, clear turning points, moments that felt overtly spiritual, but that is not how it works. What throws your rhythm off often appears when you are tired after a long day, when you have just been disappointed by another door closing, when you simply want to rest for a moment in someone else's presence. You are not searching for danger. You are searching for comfort. And it is that very comfort that makes you forget that not everything which eases your heart comes from me. I do not blame you for this. I understand your condition. I see how you have tried to keep your pace, your heart, your faithfulness through many seasons no one noticed. I know there are days when you do everything right and still feel empty. It is in days like those that the gentlest invitations become more appealing. They do not ask you to change immediately. They only suggest that you loosen your grip a little. And you agree, because you think a little will not hurt. You do not realize that traps rarely enter your life with noise. They enter through familiarity. They do not carry the feeling of danger. They carry the feeling of perfect timing. Right when you are tired. Right when you need someone to understand. Right when you are questioning your own worth. And you call it a blessing not because you are certain, but because you are in need. Someone listens to you longer than others. Someone does not interrupt you. Someone remembers details you once shared that even you have forgotten. There is a place where you feel you do not have to try so hard to be recognized. And for the first time in a long while, you feel seen. That feeling is warm. It carries no darkness. It carries no threat. It smells like the hope you once prayed for. You are not wrong for needing to be seen. You are not weak for wanting to be heard. I created you with a need for connection. But what you have not clearly distinguished is, this being seen is not the same as being led. There are eyes that look at you attentively yet do not know where you should go. There are words of comfort that lighten your heart but cannot keep your soul when night falls. There are connections that make you feel valuable while quietly pulling you away from the simplicity of relying on me. I see you beginning to open your heart more quickly, not because you lack wisdom, but because you are tired of always having to be strong. You allow yourself to speak more, to share more deeply, because at last someone is willing to listen. You do not realize that at the very moment you feel safest, you ask me the least, not because you have forgotten me, but because you assume this must be fine, and you do not want to interrupt the feeling of being understood with difficult questions. A beautiful trap does not tell you to sin. It does not ask you to do what you already know is wrong. There are evenings when you do not think you are standing before anything significant. You only feel tired in a way that leaves you without the strength to stay alert, without the margin to discern, without the patience to ask whether something should be brought before me or not. You reply to a message later than usual. You let a conversation linger longer than necessary, not because you want to go far, but because you do not want to return to the emptiness you feel inside at that moment. And I see clearly the instant you loosen your grip on the old rhythm very lightly, very humanly. You begin to grow accustomed to having someone waiting for your reply. Not urging, not demanding, just waiting. That waiting makes you feel valued in a way you have not felt for a long time. You do not need to prove anything. You do not need to recount your whole journey. You do not need to explain why you are tired. You only need to be present. And you exhale. You do not call it a blessing out loud, but your heart has already given it a name. I do not deny the feeling of being seen. I simply watch the way you begin to lean on it. There are moments when you realize you are anticipating a conversation more than you are longing for my presence. Not because you do not love me, but because you have grown accustomed to having to be strong before me, before people. You are allowed to be weak without being questioned. Before me, you fear that if you allow yourself to be weak, you will have to slow down. and you are not ready for that slowness. So you choose what makes you feel lighter immediately. I see that choice taking place in silence. The loosening does not come through a single major decision. It comes through the things you let pass. You let a moment of stillness pass. You let a question pass. You let a faint unease pass. You tell yourself that you are still fine, still holding your standards, still not doing anything wrong. But life does not leave only when you do wrong. It also leaves when you stop listening. And you do not realize when you stopped listening, because everything still seems to be flowing smoothly. Then another kind of weariness appears. Not the fatigue of doing too much, but the fatigue of holding things together, holding an image, holding a story, holding everything in a state of being okay. You become tired enough to begin craving a path that costs less effort, not a wrong path, just a faster one. A path that gives you the sense of moving forward without having to wait. And when that shortcut appears, it does not need to persuade you much. It only needs to arrive when you are depleted. You do not think you are trading anything away. You think you are resting. You think you are merely taking a detour. But I see clearly what you have not yet named. You are using motion to avoid restoration. You do not want to stop long enough to see how tired you truly are. And so anything that promises you less effort sounds entirely reasonable. I do not blame you for this. I simply see the cost forming very slowly. When you begin to keep a part of yourself for yourself, you do not call it hiding. You call it wisdom. You do not lie. You simply say less. You do not avoid me entirely. You just steer clear of topics that would require you to face certain things. You pray with safe words. You speak in sentences that do not touch, and I stand there not exposing, only waiting for you to realize that this silence is making you lonelier than you imagine. There are nights when you lie down and your body refuses to rest. Your heart races without a clear reason. Your thoughts keep running though you are exhausted. You call this state excitement, because you do not want to admit that peace slipped away some time ago. You are used to being led by me through stillness. So when stillness is gone, you need another name in order not to stop. And adrenaline becomes the most acceptable name. I see you trying to fill the emptiness with sound, with plans, with interaction. You do not want to be alone with the question that is growing heavier in your heart. But the more you avoid it, the heavier it becomes. You begin to sense that there is a clear difference between the feeling of being alive and the feeling of being pulled along. And within that distinction, the inner pressure increases, not exploding, but enough that you can no longer keep calling everything by the old names. It only whispers that you no longer need to be as careful as before. It suggests that you can pray a little less, pause a little less, bring fewer decisions before me. It does not take your faithfulness away in a single day. It loosens each small tightening just enough that you do not notice you have changed. Like a screw slowly being loosened, not falling out, not making a sound. Each turn releases only a little, not enough to raise alarm, not enough to make you stop, but enough that when pressure comes, the whole structure can no longer hold as it once did. I see this happening in the evenings when you skip your quiet time because today probably doesn't need it. In the decisions you no longer bring to prayer because it's just a small thing. In the way you say you are fine, even as your soul has begun to grow weary. You do not leave me in a single step. You drift through many very small steps, each with a reasonable explanation. And precisely because they make sense, you do not feel the need to stop. You still do the right things. You still keep familiar forms, but your inner rhythm has changed. You listen less. You wait less. You allow me to interrupt your thoughts less. I do not say this to frighten you. I say it so you may recognize what is happening while it is still gentle, while there is still room to return, while you can still hear the very thin difference between feeling comforted and true presence. I do not expose to shame you. I bring light so you do not continue walking unconsciously. You still believe you are in control. You trust that if something were wrong, you would notice immediately. But a beautiful trap does not strike your reason, it strikes what you lack. And when you lack, it is easy to mistake soothing for guidance. I do not blame you for opening your heart. I only want you to remember that not everything that comes gently is sent by me. I stand very close to you in those moments, even when you do not ask. I do not leave when you are busy. I do not fall silent when you are tired. I simply wait until you are ready to hear my rhythm again, the rhythm that does not rush, does not pull, does not ask you to trade awareness for ease. And the moment you begin to sense that something no longer quite fits, even before you can name it, that is when my light has already begun to touch the place you least expected. There is a very specific moment when shortcuts begin to feel persuasive when you are tired, not when you are morally weak, but when you have tried long enough, when you see that you have waited, exerted yourself, kept your pace through many seasons, and the outcome still has not arrived as you hoped. In that moment, anything that promises rest more quickly carries an almost irresistible pull. It does not have to be wrong. It only needs to be something that requires less effort. I see you telling yourself that this is only a temporary detour, that you will return to your old rhythm once things settle, that you deserve to feel lighter for a while. And you are not wrong to long for rest. But a shortcut does not heal fatigue, it only postpones true recovery. It gives you the sensation of moving faster, while inside you are quietly being drained. When you are tired, you begin to compare more. You look at those who seem to reach the destination sooner. You hear stories of shorter roads, faster methods, less demanding options. You start to wonder why you have to take the long way around. And it is precisely within that question that the shortcut enters quietly. It does not ask you to betray anything. It simply suggests that you change the pace, change the timing, change the order. Trade waiting for a temporary sense of certainty. I do not need to retell an old story for you to understand this. Simply naming Esau is enough. Not because he was evil, but because he was exhausted. Not because he did not understand value, but because the hunger in front of him felt greater than the promise he carried. I remind you of this not to condemn you, but to help you recognize a very human pattern when you are tired. You are more likely to sell what is long-term for what is immediately relieving, and that cost does not always reveal itself at once. When you begin to move at a faster pace, another change happens alongside it. One you scarcely notice you begin to hide. Not from the whole world, only from me. You do not lie, you simply do not say everything. You withhold a piece of information, a corner of a decision, a motive that has not yet been brought into the light. You tell yourself that when things are clearer, you will place it before me. But the longer it goes on, the more accustomed you become to handling it on your own. I see you avoiding a gentle question during prayer. I see you shift the subject when I touch a place you are not ready to open. I see you choose vague words instead of truth. Not because you are rebellious, but because you fear that if you speak honestly, you will have to stop. And stopping, at this moment, feels like loss. I do not accuse you for that instinct to protect yourself. I only want you to see that hiding does not protect you. Hiding isolates you. My light does not come to expose you before others. It comes to restore your inner wholeness. When you keep a corner in the dark, you must spend energy shielding it. You have to remember what you said and what you did not say. You have to guard the story you are maintaining, and that guarding consumes you little by little. You grow more tired, not because you are doing more, but because your life is no longer simple. Then something else begins to surface, subtle, difficult to name unease. But you do not call it that. You call it excitement. You have been so familiar with peace that when it leaves, the emptiness is mislabeled as fresh energy. Your heart beats faster. Your thoughts race. Your nights become more restless. Yet you tell yourself that you are being stimulated, that you are stepping into something big, I do not lead you through chaos. There are days when you find yourself weary not because you are doing too much, but because you are thinking too much, thinking about what to say, what to keep, where to stay silent, thinking ahead of situations that have not yet happened, preparing answers in your mind, not to deceive anyone, but to protect what you are holding on to. You do not call this anxiety, you call it responsibility. Yet the moment you must live in a constant state of preparation, your soul no longer rests. I see you beginning to control in very refined ways, not by commanding or imposing, but by arranging your time to avoid inconvenient questions, arranging your words so no one touches the corner you are concealing, arranging your emotions so hesitation does not show. You do all of this skillfully, but that skill does not make you lighter. It tightens you in a way you are not accustomed to. There comes a moment when you realize you are listening to many voices at once, the voice of expectation, the voice of opportunity, the voice of fear of being late, and among them, my voice has not disappeared, but it no longer stands out as it once did, not because I have grown quieter, but because you are no longer still enough to hear. You begin to choose what makes you feel secure immediately, rather than what keeps you at peace over time. And you do not notice that this shift happens gradually, without warning. I see you responding more quickly instead of truly answering. You reply immediately so you do not have to think further. You decide early so you do not have to remain in uncertainty. Yet uncertainty is often the place where I stand and wait, not to trouble you, but to awaken you. When you move past it too quickly, you are not instantly wrong. You simply begin to lose discernment. You tell yourself that you are moving forward. And yes, you are moving, but movement is not the same as being led. There are advances that take you farther from what gives you life, while still preserving the feeling that you are on the right path. I do not fault you for not recognizing this at once. Those steps closely resemble the ones you once took with me. There is only one difference: you have to strain to hold them together. There are evenings when you sit alone and feel a heaviness in your heart, yet you do not dare to name it. You fear that if you do, you will have to stop, and you are not ready to stop. You tell yourself you only need a little more time, a little more stability, a little more confirmation, but each little draws you farther away from the simplicity that once sustained you for so long. I see you beginning to measure yourself by the reactions of others, not because you crave praise, but because you need to know whether you are on the right path. When you no longer hear me clearly, you turn to external signals, a look of agreement, a timely compliment, a silence that offers no objection. These become temporary markers that allow you to keep going, but they were never built to guide you for the long run. You no longer speak fully about what is happening within you, not because you are dishonest, but because you do not want to complicate things further. You hold on to questions without answers. You hold on to uncertainties you are not yet ready to face. And when you hold them long enough, they begin to shape the rhythm of your life even though you have never named them. There are mornings when you wake and feel a familiar tension, not panic, just a quiet unrest. You plan the day with your mind, but your body does not keep pace. You drink another cup of coffee, open more tasks, fill the calendar more tightly. You call it productivity, but I see that you are using movement to avoid the truth that peace is no longer at the center. I do not lead you by stimulation. I do not need to make your heart race to prove that I am at work. What comes from me most often arrives with a quiet steadiness. When that rhythm slips away, I want you to notice not to accuse yourself, but to stop before the cost becomes greater. Yet you have grown accustomed to moving forward without peace, and that habit is wearing you down more deeply than you realize. I see you beginning to adjust yourself to fit what you are pursuing. Not in dramatic ways, just becoming less sensitive, less soft, less real. You do it so gradually that no one notices. Not even you, but your soul notices. And that soul is sending signals through your body through fatigue, through tension, through restless nights. You begin to find that you must remember more. Remember what you said, what you promised, what you are holding together. Before, you did not need to remember so much. Your life was simpler. Now you are managing more layers, and every added layer is a layer that dims the light. I am not pointing this out to unsettle you. I want you to recognize the difference between maturity and complexity. Maturity makes you steadier. Complexity makes you heavier. You are carrying both. But only one comes from me. You did not lose your way in a single step. You are walking in a different rhythm, and that rhythm is not loud. It does not announce itself clearly. It differs only in this: you must hold yourself together more tightly. Before, you walked without guarding yourself. Now you walk while constantly watching for what might slip. That vigilance exhausts you, even though you cannot yet name why. You think you are being more careful, but in truth you are bracing yourself. I see you becoming cautious even with your own emotions. You do not let yourself feel joy fully, nor sorrow deeply. You fear that if your emotions go too far, they will lead to questions you are not ready to answer. So you keep everything at a manageable level. But that just enough does not give you life. It only allows you to exist. And I know you feel this, even if you have not said it aloud. At times you wonder why prayer no longer flows as naturally as before. Not because you have abandoned me, but because you fear that if you linger too long in my presence, something will be touched. You still pray, but you choose safe spaces, familiar words. You avoid places that might require you to truly stop. I do not force you to go deeper. I simply stand and wait for you to notice that you are standing in shallower water than before. You begin to measure your life by efficiency, what you accomplished today, what you secured, how far you advanced. Rarely do you ask whether you were at peace. And when peace is absent, you do not treat it as a sign, you treat it as the cost of progress. But, my child, peace is not a reward for those who walk correctly. It is the guide for those who belong to me. I see you growing accustomed to explaining things inwardly, explaining your decisions, explaining your feelings, explaining what does not quite align. You do this quietly, but these explanations are taking the place of trust. When you trust, you do not need to explain much. When you begin to explain excessively, it is because you are trying to hold yourself upright on your own. This shift in rhythm does not make you wrong all at once. It simply moves you farther from what once held you securely. You are not lost, you are just no longer light. And that heaviness is accumulating. Little by little, creating a pressure you cannot dismiss much longer. You begin to sense that if you continue this way, you will live in a state of ongoing tension. And your soul knows that is not what I promised. I do not say these things to force you to choose immediately. I am simply holding you here, in this moment of recognizing that the rhythm has changed, so that you cannot continue unconsciously. Once you see, you can no longer pretend that everything is the same, and that very awareness increases the tension by one quiet degree, subtle, but real. I have not yet asked you to let anything go. I have not demanded that you choose. I am only holding you here long enough that you cannot keep walking without seeing clearly that you are changing pace. And that seeing increases the pressure, not loudly, not explosively, but with enough weight that you are no longer comfortable as before. You begin to understand that if you continue certain things, you will have to shrink in places where you were once wide. You will have to grow accustomed to tension. You will have to accept unrest as normal. And deep within, you know this is not how I led you from the beginning. Here before you decide. But after you have seen the tension reaches a point where you cannot return to your former unawareness. What I bring always carries one clear sign. No matter the season, you are in peace. Not a fragile calm, but an inner order that is not displaced by external pressure. I set this sign as your standard long ago. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, Colossians 3:1-5. When peace no longer rules, something else has taken the throne. You begin to notice that, although things seem to be progressing, inwardly, you are not settled. You are uneasy with yourself. You need noise to fill the space. You need activity to avoid stopping. You need connection so you do not have to hear the question echoing within. I am not saying you have gone the wrong way. I am saying you have allowed a different rhythm to lead you, and that rhythm does not allow you to rest. I am very near to you on nights like these. When you turn over and cannot sleep, when you pick up your phone and set it down again, when you try to reassure yourself that everything will be fine if you just go a little further, I do not blame you for going farther than you intended. I simply invite you to stop long enough to realize that what is slipping away is not opportunity, but peace. I do not rush to turn you back. I do not tear you away from what you are holding. I simply allow you to see more clearly the difference between excitement and presence. One tightens you. The other expands you. One requires you to keep holding on. The other holds you even when you let go. When you begin to discern between the two, the tension within you increases, because you can no longer name everything the way you once did. You are moving closer to a point where you must ask yourself what you are truly following. Not to answer immediately, but to stop exchanging one feeling for another. I do not force you to choose in this moment. I keep you here, between fatigue and truth, so that you do not decide simply because you do not want to wait any longer. And it is precisely in this incomplete pause that the question begins to grow heavier, even before you can fully name it. I am not asking how much you are receiving. I am not asking how far you have progressed. The question I place before you is quieter, but far weightier. Who are you becoming at this pace? There are changes that cannot be measured by outcomes, but by the shape of your heart when no one is watching. Are you becoming softer, or more closed, more genuine, or merely more skillful, more willing to listen, or quicker to defend? These questions are not meant to slow you down. They are meant to keep you from losing yourself while you believe you are moving upward. I observe how you speak to those closest to you, not whether your words are right or wrong, but how your tone has changed. I see your reflex when you are corrected. I see the speed with which you protect yourself. I see how quickly you explain instead of listening. These things are small, but they speak more truthfully than any declaration. You may still do familiar things, still maintain old standards, but inside, you have begun to tighten in places that were once very soft. I once gave Solomon everything human beings long for: wisdom, prosperity, honor. He did not lose his way because of lack, but because of abundance. Not because he did not know me, but because he began to allow what did not come from me to remain too close. I do not remind you of his story to make you afraid of blessing. I remind you so you understand that results do not protect identity. Only continual surrender preserves the heart. You begin to recognize a very clear sign within yourself: you are contracting. Not contracting in humility, but contracting out of fear of loss. You hold tighter. You calculate more. You control details more closely. You check your phone more frequently. You rehearse scenarios in your mind before anything happens. These things do not make you bad, but they make you smaller. And I did not create you to live in that constricted state. My blessing always causes you to expand in heart, expand in breath, expand in trust. When something comes from me, you do not need to tense yourself to keep it. You do not need to stay on constant guard. You do not need to build fences around your soul. But when you are in something that does not belong to me, no matter how beautiful it appears, you will begin to close in to protect yourself. You will call that tension responsibility, caution, maturity. But I see the difference clearly. I do not forbid you from stepping into something new. I do not close doors out of jealousy. I teach you how to walk so that when you step forward, you do not lose yourself. My rhythm is not fast, but it is steady. My rhythm does not take away opportunity. It refines it. And the things that cannot endure this rhythm, however attractive they may be, will leave on their own. Not because I drive them away, but because they were not created to walk with you at this depth. You are standing very close to a crossroads you can no longer pretend not to see. You do not have to choose immediately. But you also cannot continue walking by old momentum. On one side is what you can keep through control, through maintaining speed, through the familiar feeling of being proactive. On the other side is what I am holding you back to give quiet, unhurried, uncertain to the eye, yet guarding your soul from being divided. I know you feel the pull from both directions, not because one side is evil, but because both have reasons. One gives you the feeling of holding something in your hands. The other asks you to trust without seeing everything yet. And here, the question I have placed before you for a long time becomes unavoidable. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Matthew 1:6-26. I do not ask this so that you abandon everything you have. I ask it so that you do not trade yourself away while believing you are winning. You have not chosen yet, and I am not pressing you to choose now. But your soul knows clearly that this is no longer a small matter. You cannot treat this as a secondary decision. You also cannot return to the innocence you had before. The light is sufficient now for you to feel the weight of this moment. And because you see it, you slow down not out of weakness, but out of awareness. I keep you here not to make you hesitate, but so that you do not choose while exhausted. Decisions that shift an entire journey are rarely made in malice. They are most often made in weariness. I do not want you to carry that weariness into the next season and call it blessing. I want you to step forward in conscious surrender, not in fear of loss. I am very near neither pulling nor pushing. I allow the crossroads to stand clearly before you, so that you cannot move forward without knowing where you are going. And as you stand here not yet decided, but already seeing the tension within you, reaches a point where every next step will no longer feel as light as before. I place you before this door, not to test your courage, but to ask you a very honest question: if this truly comes from me, why must you hide? Why must you hurry? Why must you persuade yourself with reasons you never needed before? You see the door opening, and your heart tightens with fear of loss. Because some things only reveal how deeply they have occupied you when they are about to leave. I do not deny that fear within you. I simply hold you still long enough so that fear does not drive your decision. True blessing does not pull you away from me, does not place you in a position where you must dim the light to keep what is shining, does not require you to trade peace for speed. And if you find yourself having to close your heart in order to move forward, that very closure is already speaking on behalf of what you have not yet dared to name. I ask you not in order to take something away, but to give it back, to return to you the simplicity that once allowed you to hear, to return to you the breath that once kept you alive, to return to you a freedom that does not need defending. For everything that comes from me can withstand the light and does not fear time. There are doors which, if you close them today, will cause you pain. Because pain always accompanies the act of releasing what you have grown used to holding. Yet that pain will not destroy you. It will save you from carrying a rhythm that is not mine into the next stretch of the journey. You fear that if you stop, you will miss out. But I tell you the truth, missing what I did not send is being spared from something that would slowly drain you in silence. Remember, my only son in the wilderness. When hunger and thirst pressed in, when the invitation sounded reasonable, when the shortcut was wrapped in good promises, he did not choose out of fear of lack. He chose because he knew who he was and where he came from, and he did not need to prove that by grasping what did not belong to the Father. You are standing here not because you are weak, but because you are being given back the authority to choose in the light where you can no longer say that you did not see, did not hear, did not know the weight of the next step. I am not saying that everything you are able to do is wrong. I am reminding you that not everything permitted will give you life. As I have spoken, all things are lawful, but not all things are beneficial. 1 Corinthians 10:23. And my question is this: which of these is benefiting your soul right now? If you close this door, you will bear the pain of explaining, of releasing a story already in motion, of accepting the emptiness before you. But in that emptiness, I will hold you, so that you do not have to patch yourself together with things that do not carry life. If you open this door in haste, you may move quickly, but you will carry a strain longer than you expect. And I do not want you to win a segment only to lose the whole journey. I do not need grand promises from you. I need an honest choice chosen in the light, not out of fear of losing, but out of a desire to remain in me when everything else changes. This central decision is not loud. There is no applause, no immediate guarantee. Yet it lays a foundation so that the steps that follow will not require you to turn back and repair them with tears. You may tremble as you choose, but do not choose in panic. Choose in presence where I am very near. So you do not have to prove anything. Do not have to persuade yourself, only to consent in quietness. And when you place your hand on that door, whether to close it or simply to leave it untouched, know that I do not leave you in this moment. I hold you firmly enough that your decision is not born from fear of loss, but from trust that remaining with me is always the safest place. I see your breathing begin to slow, not because every question has been answered, but because the greatest fear no longer controls you. The fear of missing out once drove you to rush, to cling, to believe that if you did not hold on, what was good would slip away. I touch that fear not with rebuke, but with a quiet truth: what I give cannot be taken by anyone, and what cannot be kept without betraying yourself was never yours to begin with. I set the timing in my hands before you ever had the chance to worry. As it is written, He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Ecclesiastes 3:1-1. When you grasp this, your chest opens not to hold more, but to breathe out. You no longer need to convince yourself. You do not have to construct reasons to justify a choice already illuminated. Peace does not arrive as a noisy reward. It returns quietly, like a familiar confirmation. Not peace because everything is resolved, but peace because you are no longer resisting what I am doing. You realize you do not need many words to prove anything, nor long explanations to make others understand, because the stillness within you is already a sufficient witness. When peace returns, you know you are walking in the right rhythm, even though you cannot yet see the entire road ahead. I restore your dignity precisely where you once thought you had lost it. You believed your worth was tied to what you could hold on to the doors you refused to let close, to the opportunities you would not allow to pass. But your dignity is not in what your hands grasp. It is in how you stand before me when your hands are open. I do not love you because you managed to keep much. I love you because you belong to me. And when you stop measuring yourself by outcomes, your soul begins to stand upright again, no longer bent by fear, no longer strained by the need to prove itself. There are very old abrasions within you, born from times when you had to persuade yourself that losing it is just something I must accept, that if I could not keep it, it must be because I was not enough. I heal those wounds not by giving you something to hold again, but by returning to you the truth about who you are. You do not lose value when you let go. You do not become smaller when you say no. You do not disappear when you slow down. In my light, you are enough even when your hands are empty. I teach you to receive blessing with open hands. My blessing does not make you shrink back, does not keep you in constant vigilance, does not force you to control for fear of loss. My blessing comes with expansion in the heart, in the breath, in the capacity to trust. As it is written, the blessing of the Lord makes rich, and He adds no sorrow with it. Proverbs 1:0-2. If what you call a blessing fills you with sorrow, tension, or constriction, Have the courage to call it by its true name. You begin to see the difference clearly between grasping and receiving. Grasping exhausts you. Receiving lightens you. Grasping keeps you on guard. Receiving allows you to rest. I do not forbid you from stepping into good things. I teach you how to step so that what is good does not become a burden. And when you learn to open your hands, you realize that true blessing does not require you to compete, nor does it require you to run. What is true will come without asking you to betray yourself. It does not demand secrecy, does not rush you, does not require you to trade peace for speed. What is true arrives in the right rhythm, carries deep inner agreement, and can endure the light. I am not late. I have never been late. I am holding not only what I have promised, but you yourself, so that when it comes, you are spacious enough to receive it without breaking. You begin to rest in this truth not by stopping all movement, but by no longer pushing yourself. You do the work before you with a quieter heart. You no longer need to keep looking back at what is closed, nor do you have to fix your eyes on what is about to open. You are present with me, here and now, and that alone makes your day feel more whole. I let peace spread like the morning dew, unhurried, unannounced, quietly covering everything. It seeps into the way you see yourself, the way you see others, the way you enter your next conversations. You do not need to promise that you will never be afraid again. I only need you to remember that, whenever fear comes, you can return here where your hands are open. Your heart is settled, and I am holding you. Before you take another step, I invite you to do something very small, so small that no one would notice unless you said it aloud. Pause. Not to be afraid, but to listen. Ask me, not with long questions, but with honesty, is this drawing you away from my presence, or keeping you within it? And then wait, not until every fear disappears, but long enough for my rhythm to touch yours again. I do not need you to decide quickly to prove your faith. True faith can bear waiting, because it knows that I am present in every still moment. When a door opens, remember that the first act is not to step through it, but to bring what is beautiful into the light. Do not hide it from me. Do not keep a corner reserved just in case. Do not convince yourself that you will speak later. When things feel more settled, light does not come to take away what is good. Light comes to keep what is good from becoming distorted. If something comes from me, it will not fear the light. If it needs darkness to survive, you already have your answer. I am not asking you to share it with others. I am simply inviting you to open it before me, where you do not have to perform or defend yourself. Practice a new, gentle discipline whenever something makes you feel lifted. Bring it before me before carrying it any further, not to ask permission, but to realign, not so that I may control you, but so that you may be free. I know you are used to carrying responsibility yourself, keeping your own pace, protecting yourself. But the freedom I give does not come from doing better, it comes from no longer having to hide. When you hide nothing from me, you also hide less from yourself. You will need a sign to remember in the days ahead. When life becomes busy and alluring again, remember this peace does not rush you. It does not push you to sign quickly, to respond immediately, to grasp before something is lost. Peace comes with a gentle clarity, no forcing, no pulling. When you feel pressured, constricted, or caught persuading yourself, return to that sign. I do not lead you by pressure. I lead you by presence. There may be moments when you look back and wonder whether you missed something. In those moments, let me remind you of a simple truth. I see what you do not see. I see the whole path, the timing, and the things your heart is not yet wide enough to carry. I do not hold you back to make you smaller. I hold you back so you will not break when something greater comes. I am not late. I have never been late. I am holding what I have promised, and holding you as you learn how to receive without losing yourself. The end of this journey is not a grand promise, but a very real peace. You do not need to say much. You do not need to make your decisions sound reasonable to everyone. You only need to remain in the rhythm you have recognized, the rhythm that does not rush, does not hide, does not compel. When you walk in that rhythm, you will discover that what belongs to me will come to you without your having to chase it. Let this word remain with you like a guiding thread, quiet, yet sure. My sheep hear my voice. I know them, and they follow me. John 10:27. You do not need to listen to every voice. You only need to recognize the familiar voice that has been calling you from the beginning. And as you follow that voice, I will lead you through every open door, not by fear, but by a trust that rests. May the word of the Lord continually remind you to live in His faith and love each day. Please follow and enable notifications so you do not miss the sacred and meaningful messages God desires to share. May God bless you. Amen.